Hey guys, what's going on? Hexlex here with another Master Duel video for you guys today. This one's going to be a little bit different as we're going to be talking about a engine more generally speaking as opposed to its application in a specific deck. Now as you're watching this video as it's going out, I'm probably testing a lot of decks right now and gathering replays for potential deck profiles regarding new decks that are going to be using this card featured here, Destiny Hero, Destroyer, Phoenix Enforcer. But before I started just going into each of these individual decks that use this engine, I thought it would be good to take a video and just talk about the engine itself and what makes this card so good. Because I think a lot of people, I don't know if I would say the vast majority, but I think quite a few people who play Master Duel are, either returning players who haven't played in quite a few years, or are, from other digital card games coming into Master Duel, one of those two categories. So I think there's a fair bit of the audience that, like I was honestly before just, a few days ago, not really aware of, well, I wasn't completely unaware of Phoenix Enforcer, but I knew about the engine, but I never really looked at all what all decks use it and all that stuff. So yeah, we'll be talking about the individual cards, about the engine, what makes it so good, and then we'll also take a look at a few decks that use the engine and just kind of take it from there. So Destiny Hero, Destroyer, Phoenix Enforcer. Let's take a look at this. It's a fusion monster that takes a level 6 or higher hero monster and then any Destiny Hero monster. It's got quite a few effects that are actually all fairly relevant here. This first one's going to be the least relevant, but monsters your opponent controls lose 200 attack for each hero card in your graveyard. So when you fusion summon it, your opponent's monsters will be losing 400 attack while it's out, which is, fairly minor, but can still come up. It can still matter pretty easily. It makes this card effectively be at, 2,900 attack points, quote unquote, but I don't know, it's not quite exactly like that, but it's still good enough. Alright, you can only use the following effects of Destiny Hero, Destroyer, Phoenix Enforcer once per turn. This is where it gets juicy. Quick effect. You can destroy both one card you control and one card on the field. If this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can activate this effect. Special summon one Destiny Hero monster from your graveyard during the standby phase of the next turn. So, there's quite a bit to go over with those two effects. First of all, being able to destroy cards as a quick effect is, obviously very, very good. Now, I think a lot of people who have watched these videos have seen me played, if not played themselves, Tri-Brigade. And while a Banish is obviously better than a Destroy, we still see the power of being able to disrupt even a single target, during our opponent's turn. And speaking of targeting, this effect doesn't actually target, by the way. It's a quick effect, that's just the condition. Quick effect, and then as soon as the effect resolves, you destroy a card you control and a card on the field. So no targeting here, has that same plus side as Shurig's effect. Furthermore, if it's destroyed for any reason, and here's where it gets a little juicy, but it gets even juicier later, let me tell you. This card, it never stops. Just the things it enables. But if it's destroyed for any reason at all, it brings back any Destiny Hero on the graveyard during the next standby phase, including, and definitely not limited to, itself. Or rather, I should say, definitely not limited to. It's very rare you actually bring back one of the fusion materials. But yeah, so this card, you can, if you really have to, or even not even if you really have to, it can often be good to just, destroy itself along with the other card. And then this just comes back during the next standby phase anyway. So you're starting to see probably now why this card is as hyped up as it is. But you might be thinking to yourself, well, okay, it's certainly a very powerful effect, but don't you have to go out of your way in order to be able to fusion summon this? Not even really at all. So let's take a look at some of the other cards that are part of the engine here. This is another key piece to the engine. That's going to be Fusion Destiny. I kind of wish Wikipedia had a clearer picture of it, but I guess the Ultimate Rare still looks pretty good. Anyway, this card's effect says, fusion summon one fusion monster from your extra deck that mentions a Destiny Hero monster as material, using monsters from your hand or deck as fusion material, but destroy it during the end phase of the next turn. Also, for the rest of this turn after this card resolves, you cannot special summon monsters except Dark Hero monsters. You can only activate one Fusion Destiny per turn. So, we know this card is semi-limited in Master Duel. It was a preemptive hit that we talked about. And it's funny because when the bans first got announced, I thought to myself, that's interesting that Fusion Destiny is at 2. That must mean, I assumed like it'd be a few months since the next ban list, so I thought we still had like a good month or so at the very least before we were gonna see DPE, but nope, Konami just dropped it right out of nowhere, which is kind of cool actually. So yeah, we can see definitely now why this card was put to 2 on the list, but 2 is still not really that bad, honestly. So the thing to note about Fusion Destiny, 1, is obviously that you can fuse the materials from your hand or deck, and as anybody who's played like Yu-Gi-Oh for, I want to say almost any amount of time, knows that fusion summoning from deck has always been busted. The first real example of that was Future Fusion in 2008, I want to say, in the TCG. And yeah, that card, I mean, I'll say this much too, anybody who's played the Future Fusion in particular knows how disgusting it is to foolish, 5 monsters with 5-headed Dragoon, or if it's machines, as many as you want with Chimera Tech, as long as 1 Cyber Dragon is in there. So, fusing from the deck has always been historically very, very good, and that is the case with Fusion Destiny as well. So another thing to note, now, Destiny, or not Destiny, what is the card? The Dragoon, the one that's the fusion of Red Eyes and Dark Magician. It's actually forbidden, thank God, in my opinion. It's actually forbidden in Master Duel. But one thing to note about comparing Fusion Destiny with the Red Eyes fusion is that Red Eyes fusion for Dragoon, if you activated it instead of using it with Vert Anaconda, which we'll talk about that in a second too, you would only be locked to that 1 special summon per turn. But Fusion Destiny, if we note, says after this card, for the rest of this turn, after this card resolves, you cannot special summon monsters except Dark Heroes. So literally, even if you draw the Fusion Destiny, you can just tack this in at the very end of your combo, at the very end of your turn, and be like, do all my deck's normal stuff, and by the way, I have a Dragoon. Or not Dragoon, yeah, by the way, I have a DPE. Like, it's so disgusting. Now, one thing I just mentioned, of course, along with the Fusion Destiny here, is the fact that you can, in fact, send it with Vert Anaconda, as the card does have fusion in its name, and Vert Anaconda, as we all know, can be made with any 2 effect monsters. So we're now starting to see how this engine can become so accessible, right? It's, obviously Vert Anaconda is a very, very splashable extra deck monster. The Fusion Destiny can be used with it to cheat it out, or even if you hard draw it, the Fusion Destiny is still good to use. And furthermore, of course, we've seen the, whoops, sorry, I bumped the cable there, hopefully that doesn't make too much noise. Of course, we've seen the raw power of Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer itself as well. So another thing you might kind of be wondering a bit is, alright, so, it's not that much of an, well, that's the other thing actually too, I meant to cover this as well. It's not that much of a main and extra deck commitment in order to actually be able to access Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, right? Because we have, so 2 extra deck slots, right, for the Vert Anaconda, if your deck isn't already playing it, and then the Phoenix Enforcer itself, and then 4 main deck slots for the 2 Destiny Hero monsters and the 2 Fusion Destinies. So for an engine that can crank out a monster just as powerful as this one is, 4 main deck slots and 2 extra deck slots is really not that much to ask at all. And again, just how sheerly accessible it is with Vert Anaconda. If your deck can spit out 2 extra effect monsters, which is not hard for a lot of decks to do, then you can pretty consistently go into this. Like, I say 2 extra because it would ideally be in addition to whatever normal combos your deck is doing, but pretty much any deck that can turbo out the 2 effect monsters and be fine and still do the regular stuff and has the room can, and honestly, in all likelihood, probably should be playing the Phoenix Enforcer engine. That is one thing that I think quite a few people are a little bit bummed about, and I'm not gonna lie, as excited as I am to play this, I am slightly bummed that it's like, okay, we're gonna be seeing this card everywhere for quite a while now. So, this is a scenario where it's like, when it comes to competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, we have these engines that end up getting a fair amount of, like, widespread use, so, but, that's not to say that it won't be fun, too, because I think this card, like, really for me personally, any excuse to use a hero monster in any capacity, even if I'm not using a hero deck, I just love heroes that much. And honestly, little known fact, my favorite of the heroes are actually Destiny heroes. So to be able to play a little bit of one of if not my favorite archetype of all time in every deck is also a little bit exciting for me. So I don't know, I have a little bit mixed feelings, but I think overall I'm feeling like I'm looking forward to it for the time being. Of course, now watch people clip this as I say like 2 months from now, like, oh boy, another Phoenix Enforcer. But you know, say la vie, just so it goes, you know. Alright, so one thing you might be wondering, which I was going to go into this tangent a little while ago, but I wanted to cover more about Phoenix Enforcer and the engine itself first. You might be wondering, okay, but what about the actual materials that we're using? Because we're going to have to put 2 random hero monsters in our deck. Is that even good? Is that even worth it, even for a card like this? It actually is, because even our fusion materials are going to end up being pretty good themselves. So let's take a look at them. For a level 6 or higher hero monster, we're going to end up using Destiny Hero Dasher, a classic card from actually the same set that Future Fusion came out, so about 2008 for the TCG. So fellow Yugi boomers will very likely remember this one. Dasher, this is not Dasher's first time in the competitive limelight, actually. Dasher was used in a fair amount of dark decks, like, for many years after it came out. This card has historically seen use as just part of Destiny Hero engines, because it's that good of a card. So what does it do? Well, for those who aren't familiar, it is a level 6, 2100 attack, 1000 defense warrior. Once per turn, you contribute another monster and have it gain 1000 attack until the end of the turn. And then if it battles, even if you don't use this effect, important to note, if it battles at any point, it is changed to defense position at the end of the battle phase. So those are obviously kind of mediocre effects, especially for a level 6 monster that can't, you know, special summon itself. You have to tribute summon it, or summon it with another effect. So however, the latter effect is the one we're here for. Once, not once per turn, mind you, just once. Once while this card is in your graveyard, when you draw a monster during your draw phase, you can reveal it, special summon it. This card must be in the graveyard to activate and to resolve this effect. So, yeah, if you top deck a monster, then you just have the option to summon it for free, which is so nice in so many decks. Like, there are so many combo lines that become accessible when you get just even one free summon. I'm sure we've all been there playing our various combo decks, like, you know, looking at your hand, figuring out all the different lines you could do, and you have that moment of like, oh man, I mean, I can do this play, but if I was just able to summon one more monster, I could do that play. And Dasher can definitely assist with that. By, again, you know, summoning something you draw. It does have to be during your draw phase. Now, I think this works, right, because of the way it's worded. It doesn't have to be your draw for a turn. If you happen to have a quick effect that you can use during the draw phase to draw cards, I think that would work too, although that is an extremely niche scenario and not even really worth mentioning, to be honest. But I guess it is worth considering somewhat. So the other fusion material that we're going to end up using as our Destiny Hero monster, because this is going to fulfill the role of level 6 or higher hero. For the Destiny Hero monster, we're going to be using Destiny Hero Celestial, which is a relatively new Destiny Hero. It came out in, well, wouldn't it say somewhere on here? Yes, the Legendary Hero decks back in 2018. Or no, sorry, Destiny Soldiers in 2016 before that. So I guess this card came out like right around the time that I stopped playing in the TCG. I think I do actually remember it coming out because, you know, like I said, Destiny Hero is one of, if not my favorite archetypes of all time. So I'm always like, ooh, new Destiny Hero. I actually remember it from the anime a long time ago. It's one of those like old anime cards that they actually released and then added a good effect. So the first effect of Destiny Hero Celestial states, when this card declares an attack, you can target one face-up spell card your opponent controls. Destroy it, and if you do, inflict 500 damage to your opponent. That's the old anime effect, which is not really super great, but not totally irrelevant. You know, there could be extremely niche scenarios where your opponent has a must-remove face-up spell card, and you can just normal summon Celestial, attack with it, and destroy the card. Actually, one scenario I could think of off the top of my head is if you're playing the DPE engine in Tri-Brigade, and your opponent happens to drop a zombie world, and you happen to have Celestial. I mean, I know this is an extremely niche case, but you could, in theory, just normal summon Celestial, go to battle phase, attack, pop the zombie world. Even if the battle was going to destroy Celestial itself, you could still just, you know, summon it, battle, pop the zombie world, then main phase 2, then you can do your tri-brigade combos. So, you know, definitely something to consider. But like Dasher, we're not really here for the first effect. We are here for the second effect, which states, while you have no cards in your hand, except to the turn this card is sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card and one Destiny Hero monster from your graveyard, draw 2 cards. You can only use the effect of Destiny Hero Celestial once per turn. Holy cow, this card is a pot of greed. It's a straight up pot of greed. Now, granted, you do have to have no cards in your hand, which is an important condition. But especially for combo-based decks where, again, like we mentioned earlier, you know, when we were talking about Fusion Destiny, it's very easy to just pop out your combo and then at the very end of it, you just tack on a Fusion Destiny from your hand at the very end. Well, similarly, if you've done your full combo and you've exhausted all the resources in your hand, the next turn you can, you know, top deck a card, play it, and then, oh, yeah, that Dragoon that you summoned last turn, which, by the way, is now coming back during this standby phase, mind you. By the way, now you can also banish the Celestial and the Dasher from grave in order to draw 2 cards. You could even empty your hand further using Dasher's effect in order to special summon the cards you draw for a turn, and then using Celestial draw 2 more cards, because if we note here, you would think this would be the case, but it's not. Dasher doesn't have to like banish itself from grave or do anything like that to use its effect. It's just once, while it's in the graveyard, you can just summon a monster that you draw for a turn. So now we're starting to see how everything all ties together, right? Like how all of these individual cards, it's not just Phoenix Enforcer. Mind you, Phoenix Enforcer being a recurring quick effect destruction ability is very powerful, but it's also, you know, the accessibility of Fusion Destiny sending materials from the deck. It's the ability of Vert Anaconda to use the Fusion Destiny from the deck with any 2 effect monsters. It's the Dasher summoning stuff from that we draw, and also the Celestial refueling our hand. Like, this engine is very small but works together so efficiently and is very independent of anything else in your deck, right? It doesn't need other, like an outside card to, you know, like a discard here or something. I mean, the only really outside things you need are, again, for Vert Anaconda, just any 2 effect monsters, which for an engine this good, you know, definitely is not that much to ask. Now, another question you might have is, okay, so I've heard of this card, but I see sometimes with this card mentioned something about it, like a Scythe. What's all that about? So, one popular tech choice to use alongside Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer is none other than, here it is, Artifact Scythe. So Artifact Scythe is a level 5 light fairy with 2200 attack and 900 defense. Like all the other cards of the Artifact archetype, Artifact Scythe's first effect allows it to set it from your hand directly into your spell and trap zone. It sets it as a spell. That's not usually very important, but it could, I guess, come up occasionally. So, what are the other abilities? During your opponent's turn, if this set card in the spell and trap zone is destroyed and sent to your graveyard, destroyed, okay, sounds familiar. Destroy a card you control and 1 card on the field, alright. So if it's destroyed during your opponent's turn and sent to the graveyard, special summon it, okay. If this card is special summoned during your opponent's turn, your opponent cannot special summon monsters in the extra deck for the rest of the turn. So, those of you who have watched me play Adamantipator undoubtedly know the power of the Destruction Sword, Dragon Buster, extra deck lock. It's like the icing on the cake with the negations in order to ensure your opponent just does not have any plays, as I think I can comfortably say 97-98% of Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks that we run into, especially up on upper tier ladder, use the extra deck, and maybe not 97-98, I'll say 95% of Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks use the extra deck in some capacity. So cutting off your opponent from having access to it at all for the entirety of their turn is definitely very, very, very good. And not only do we just, you know, cut them off from access to their extra deck, but again, remember, we're popping it with Phoenix Enforcer, so we're also getting to destroy one of their cards as well. So yeah, you literally just, you know, you make a Phoenix Enforcer, and then you also just set the Artifact Scythe, and then yep, during your opponent's turn, as soon as they play something you want to destroy, and or as soon as they are about to summon from the extra deck, as they're setting their materials up, you can just be like, alright, Phoenix Enforcer, pop my set, Artifact Scythe, special summon it. By the way, special summon it too. You even get a free 2200 attack monster on top of it all. Now, that is actually something to be mindful of if you're playing a combo deck that does have like a lot of monsters on the board at the end of the combo. Then you do want to make sure you have room in order to play an Artifact Scythe. But of course, that's another extremely niche case scenario, right? Like the vast majority of the time, you get to play it with no problem at all. And you can even search Artifact Scythe. It's pretty accessible to get this card out without hard drawing it. How we do that is with the Link Monster Artifact Dagda, I think it is, Dagda. You can make it with any two monsters with different names. So again, we're seeing like Vert Anaconda, just very generic requirements. When an effect of another card on the field is activated, quick effect, you can set one artifact monster from your hand or deck to your spell trap zone as a spell, but destroying it during your opponent's next end phase. And then it has another effect during your opponent's turn. If this Link Summon card is destroyed, you can special summon an artifact from your graveyard in defense position, and you can only use one of these effects, each of these effects once per turn. So, yeah, we can see, like I mentioned earlier, with like Vert Anaconda, this is very easy to make extremely generic requirements, and allows you to just set up the Scythe directly from your deck for the Phoenix Enforcer to destroy. And again, like I said, it's very generic requirements. So really, if it was a better option to, which in some cases it is, like forego your combos like regular, or your deck's like regular combo, as long as you can get out two effect monsters and two monsters with different names, like there you go, you can make Dagda and Vert Anaconda, and then boom, from there you can just set up your Phoenix Enforcer plus the Scythe. And I think if I'm reading this correctly, because they're both Link 2s, and I don't think either of them has restrictions as far as what they can be used as materials, right? Nope. So like if you're able to make both of these, on top of that, you could also throw on a 2-material Appaloosa. So that's actually pretty disgusting. So if you include the Artifact Scythe engine, then your total investment you're looking at is 5 main deck slots, 3 extra deck slots, which is still not really that bad at all. Now, I don't know that I'm going to be including the Artifact Scythe and Dagda into every single deck that I play the Phoenix Enforcer in. I don't think that's going to be the case for me personally, but I'm still going to be testing it out in pretty much any deck that can afford to find room for it. Now, it doesn't sound like a lot, 5 main deck cards and 3 extra deck slots, but it really does vary from deck to deck. There are some decks that can afford a little bit more leeway than others. So it's really just going to be case by case whether or not you can slot in Destroyer, Phoenix Enforcer. Of course, we also still have to think about, does it make sense with our deck, right? Like when we think about like Adamantimators, which I had that deck profile recently, this engine doesn't really make a whole lot of sense in that deck because, it's more dead cards that we are throwing in, dead cards in the sense that they are dead with our Adamancipator tuners excavating. Now, maybe further testing could prove me wrong on this. The time I'm recording this card isn't even out yet. It's still only just been announced. So, but yeah, maybe that could be wrong, but I can't imagine it's good in Adamancipator. But so yeah, it's kind of just deck by deck, case by case. But I don't think most decks will have trouble finding room for the engine here. Speaking of decks that do play the engine, let's take a brief look at some decks in the OCG that picked up on Destroyer, Phoenix Enforcer relatively quickly. Now let me see here. I have a couple of tabs open. Let me see if it's this one. No, sorry, this was something else I was looking at. Let me actually just go ahead and close that. Okay, here we go. This is the one I'm looking for. So, one thing to note about the decks we're about to see that include Destroyer, Phoenix Enforcer, just based on what I'm seeing. Oh, by the way, I should mention the website I'm on. I'm on Road of the King. We were actually on this website like way back in like end of season 1, beginning of season 2. I used this website because they did a brief little Master Duel report before I really learned about Master Duel meta. But this deck is a very useful resource if you're interested in the OCG metagame and what's going on over there and all that fun stuff. So, yeah, if we're going to look at the breakdown here, there is one thing I want to note, though. This is, as far as I could tell, I could be wrong, but as far as I could tell, this was the first mention of Destroyer, Phoenix Enforcer, like the first time we really started seeing it. Well, we actually see it in this previous this previous one too. But this breakdown didn't have Sword Soul, so I wanted to include the one that did because you know, obviously we're going to be having Sword Soul as well, so this breakdown is going to be overall a little bit more relevant to us. Now that doesn't mean that I'm not saying that this is going to be the exact breakdown of the decks in Master Duel as well, because as I've been alluding to here, around the same time it seems like Phoenix Enforcer came out is when the Adventure Engine also released. Adventure Engine is like, that's going to be a whole other video when that engine comes out. But suffice it to say, we don't have it in Master Duel just yet. So this actually puts Master Duel in a pretty unique spot, right? Where we have cards that are coming out in an order that we didn't see them come out in the OCG. And as far as I know, the TCG too, although I haven't done as much research about when Dragoon debuted over here. But we're not seeing the adventure cards over here, so that and also the fact that we have radically different ban lists could radically affect what decks play DPE and possibly even affect how good DPE is. Now, I do think the Phoenix Enforcer engine is still going to be seeing play in droves, honestly. Like, I think you'll see it a lot, but it's still just, I don't know, it's kind of hard to say without seeing it shake down, especially because, again, it's coming so much sooner than I think a lot of people were anticipating. Konami just kind of announced it out of nowhere, like 3-4 days before it was actually going to come out. So that being the case, also we've had less time to prep for it. I mean, like I said earlier in the video, I thought DPE was going to come out, I thought like maybe a month from now at the earliest. So I kind of been in Sword Soul and, you know, all these other cards being released. So I was like, well, I'll do more research about them later, like maybe in a week or two. But nope, now I have like basically 48 hours to fully learn all these decks, and it's like, oh boy, this is fun. But you know, the sudden announcement is also actually pretty fun, genuinely. So yeah. Anyway, let's look at some of these decks here. But again, keep in mind, like we touched on Phantom Knights here briefly. This is definitely a deck that can make very good use of the Destiny Hero Phoenix Enforcer engine. It's not hard at all to slot it in. This build is also using the Adventure Engine. This deck is going to be really good when we get the Adventure Engine, by the way, from what I've seen and from what I've noted in my personal research. But it's one of the reasons I moved into the deck, actually, relatively soon. But so yeah, Phantom Knights is definitely a deck, like I said, that can make good use of it. It's already playing Dark Monsters. It's already got, like I said, you can find room relatively easily. You know, we could still be playing like the Burning Abyss engine, as well as like the Destiny Hero engine. And it's certainly not hard to get 2 extra effect monsters to make the Vert Anaconda in this deck either. And looks like this build is actually playing the Dagda in the extra deck, even though it's citing the Scythe. So that's gonna be something I'll test deck to deck, even among decks that I'm playing DPE in, to determine whether or not I think I have the room and whether it's viable to consistently go into the Dagda for the Scythe there. Interestingly enough, so we see Drytron here in the OCG, but of course we'll have Ben 10 at 1. That's actually going to be another thing that's going to be fairly radically different from our format than from this one. So again, we can't just take this breakdown at face value, right? Because again, our ban list is going to be so different. And actually, did we see... no, it doesn't look like the Drytrons play it. Yeah, I was reading somewhere that like Drytrons, you can play the DPE engine if you really want to, but you don't need it. Although maybe with Ben 10 going to 1 and the deck having some extra room, maybe it does end up being actually the right call in Master Duel. Who knows? We'll see. Maybe people who know more about Drytron could, like from the side of playing with it, could chime in about your thoughts about that. Here, of course, we have Sword Soul, which actually does also play the DPE engine, as we see here, as well as some artifacts. Another cool thing about the Artifact engine is that you can play the Lancia, although that doesn't always come up. But it is still important to note, I guess. But yeah, so you see even the new deck, even Sword Soul, is also using the DPE engine. Sword Soul, I'm not going to touch much on in this video because, one, I actually still need to do a fair bit more research on it because, again, I was just going to start practicing Sword Soul on, like, Edo Pro, you know. My plan was when I thought this was going to come out in, like, a month or so, like, oh, I'll do it in, like, a couple of weeks. But once again, now I'm like, okay, I have 48 hours to start learning all the combo lines and everything for this deck. So, yeah, fun stuff. But, like I said, we'll get through it. You see, Prank Kids is also... Actually, this build is not using the DPE engine, which I find kind of interesting. I am planning, I think, on using the DPE engine in my Prank Kids build. Again, it's just kind of weird to not see it here. I mean, the deck already plays Vert Anaconda. There is an argument that maybe it's kind of hard to find room in the extra deck, but I'm currently only playing one Battle Butler anyway. I think I'm playing like a Nightmare Phoenix as my extra card, so we can definitely just play that instead of like the Nightmare Phoenix. Again, the Prank Kids are also using the Adventure engine, which again is also really, really, really good in that deck, but is another deck to note because, yeah, we don't have the Adventure engine, we only have DPE, so yeah, things like I said are still going to be fairly different. We see here, even Tri-Brigade, even Tried True Tri-Brigade is using the DPE engine in this OCG build. Now, as far as my build for Master Duel, I touched on this in my little disclaimer before the post-banless build that I built literally one day before I knew these new cards were coming out, which of course, you know, radically changes everything. So there goes kind of that video. Kind of, not really, but it's like I said in that video, though, I am going to be testing a Zodiac Tri-Brigade deck that both does and does not use the DPE engine. So, because one thing to actually note that is very different about this Tri-Brigade deck versus the one we have in Master Duel is that at this point in the OCG, Trident was banned, and Rat Pierre, as you can see, was actually still legal, and so was Barrage. So even though it's still Tri-Zoo, it's very, very different, which is why it's playing stuff like Rescue Cat, I think, is because you know, the Zodiac engine is like pretty much only there for Zeus, and I mean, you could argue that it's kind of only there for Zeus and Tri-Zoo now, but those of you who've watched my combo guides know that Trident does actually enable combos, like, in and of itself. By detaching with it, you can, you know, then go into Chakanane and bring back whatever you detach and link those into Ferrijit. Like, that comes up a fair bit when you're using the Zodiac, so it's definitely not, like, completely irrelevant. And it's actually kind of hard to say where Tri-Brigade is going to end up falling and whether or not it just uses the DPE engine. I don't know, because the other thing to remember too is Master Duel is a best of one format, and a lot of the reason that Tri-Zoo is so powerful in Master Duel is because it shines, its versatility allows it to shine in a best of one format. But then, of course, it's also got 2 Fractal now, so that's kind of a point against it. See what I'm saying? Like, there's points both for and against the state that Tri-Zoo is in now in Master Duel compared to where it was in the OCG when this list was relevant. So, once again, we cannot just take this list at face value and say, like, okay, well, this is about what I'll have to do in order to play Tri-Zoo moving forward. It's like, no, we have to do our own due diligence and test and figure it out for ourselves. So, that is what I plan on doing. I have a lot of decks to test in the next few days. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to be... Hex is going to be a very busy Lex, let me just say that. But it's a fun kind of busy, right? Because there's just so many different... I mean, off the top of my head, I have 4 decks I'm going to test, right? Like Sword Soul, Tri-Zoo, 2 different variants of Tri-Zoo as well. And then I'll be testing DPE in both Phantom Knight and Prank Kids as well. So that's right off the bat, like 4. And by the way, do look forward to seeing deck profiles for all 4 of those eventually. I'll try to get those out within the next few days or so, but yeah, I'll just try to get those out as soon as I can. Let's see what we've got here. Okay, that's the conclusion for this report. So, yeah, so looking at these OCG reports can be somewhat useful in order to kind of like assess the power level of, you know, upcoming cards, but we just want to be mindful of the differences between the OCG list at the time and our Master Duel list, as well as the card pool, not just the ban list there. So... Alright, wow, you know, it's funny, when I started this video, I was like, I think it'd be nice if I managed to talk about this engine for 20 minutes, and here we are at over half an hour, so I'm glad I managed to hit my limits, so to speak, that I wanted to hit. I hope this video was helpful to people who, you know, weren't too familiar with Phoenix Enforcer, because I only even vaguely knew of it until maybe a couple of weeks ago when I decided to, like, okay, I'm finally going to start looking at what all decks like use this card. I'm going to start looking at like the OCG about the time this card came out, and I'm glad I did that then, because now the card's coming out way sooner than I expected. Again, I'm kicking myself for not doing the same with Sword Soul when I had the opportunity, but you know, again, so it goes. But yeah, I hope if those who were like me a week or 2 ago and really just wanting to learn more about this card and its uses and the engine as a whole, I hope you're able to find this video useful, and let me know in the comments what decks you plan on putting Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer in, because I am extremely interested to know that. Because again, I might have done my research, but I've not actually played with this card yet myself. It's one thing to do research, but you need also the quote unquote field study. You need the practice actually using it in games to get a feel of how it's used in the decks, how it like can be integrated with your deck's combos, how easily, for example, you can go into the Vert and or the Dagda to set up the Scythe. If you can afford to play the engine at all, if you can afford to play the Scythe engine, maybe you play DPE engine but not the Scythe and the Dagda. You know, it's like it could be any. Yeah, I don't know. It's fun. I love it. It's one of my favorite parts of Yu-Gi-Oh! So yeah, do let me know about what decks you plan on using DPE in, and also if you don't mind in the comments, specify whether or not you're going to be using Scythe with it as well. I'm just very, like I said, I'm as much data as I can collect about this. I'm extremely interested to know. All right, I think I've rambled on long enough about this. Whether you think about it glorious or God-forsaken card. Alright, without further ado, this is Xlex, signing out. Hope you guys have a fantastic day.